It's a brave new world we live in. The history of the last 2 centuries has seen an incredible acceleration in human achievements. Homo sapiens, the thinking man, has mastered flight, gone to the moon, and pushed back the frontiers of medicine and science. Great stuff, but it's also fast that Monday's breakthrough is Tuesday's ho-hum. And yet there is another history much older than man's, and it's never ho-hum.
There was a time when people who made natural history films used to think that if you wanted real drama, you'd have to go to Africa, where there were animals, big animals like lions, and which pounced on wildebeest, and elephant, which battled with one another. And then along came Jim Frazier and Densey Klein. And they showed that you could get just as gripping a drama right from an Australian backyard. Jim, because he had extraordinary ingenuity in inventing lenses that made shots like this one possible. And Densey, because of her great and intimate knowledge of small creatures, which enabled us to know just what animals like this one were actually doing. And the world of natural history films has never been quite the same since.
Okay, then I'm rolling.
This is just another day at the office for Jim Frazier and Densey Klein. The star of the film is a North Queensland barking spider. The cameraman is Jim, of course, and the ackler is Densey Klein.
See if you can ackle around to... Oh, lovely.
Okay.
Right. Rolling on that, that's fantastic.
Tell me when you're ready and I'll get her up high.
Ackle?
There's one job I have to do, and this is usually in connection with filming. Jim does all the filming, of course, but sometimes he needs somebody to poke and prod the insects or the spiders, or put them in the right position, or stop them from running away. So I have that particular job, and that job has a rather strange name. It's called ackling. It was invented by the BBC Natural History Unit long, long ago, and I think it's a wonderful word, so I spend quite a lot of my time ackling.
Okay, spider on the mound.
If it'll go. Come on, spider.
Oh.
No, it did not.
Some spiders stay put. Some spiders don't. And this is a don't one.
This wolf spider doesn't need ackling so much. It needs to be hypnotised to stand still.
Girl.
At last.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it now.
Okay.
Great, I can actually get the reflection there. Right, that's perfect, that's perfect. Okay. It's amazing what you can do when you split light up through a half-mirrored glass. So let's try the colour gels.
I don't see anything unpleasant or frightening or dangerous about, let's say, spiders. You know, you hear people saying, I hate spiders. Well, to me that is totally incomprehensible. I don't see how anybody could hate anything in nature, because when you get to know them, they're just leading their lives the way we lead our lives, and not doing any harm to anybody. I've never been attacked or bitten by any of my photographic subjects. I suppose this is because I treat them with respect. I don't pick up spiders. I mean, that's just foolish, because obviously a spider, if it's picked up, will try and defend itself. And spiders kill their prey with venom, and they have nasty sharp fangs to do it with. Well, that's fine, but obviously you don't interfere with the spider because there's always that risk.
Thing I've discovered over the years is that if there's anything out there at all that will scratch, bite, punch, kick, chew, it'll get you in the end. And sometimes you have to just live with mosquitoes biting you on the ankles, and you can't move, you can't show that you're in a particular place. So you wear all these mosquitoes, ants up your nose, that really hurts. That happened once. Things that grab and gnaw at you are quite common. Then the things in the plant world that sting and grab you like thorns. Going through the rainforest often is quite an experience. Rainforests are called rainforests because it damn well rains, which means that your gear gets saturated, you get saturated. It's very uncomfortable filming in rainforests. We had one disastrous period of 5 weeks where we saw 5 blue sky days and the rest was rain. Now, the fungus and the moisture that got into our equipment, we threw thousands and thousands of dollars worth of gear and equipment away. And that's the sort of things you have to put up with and wear in rainforests.
It's hot, it's wet and it's uncomfortable. But soon, Jim will be above all that. Hides are like money. They don't grow on trees. Somebody has to build them there. Meet John Young. In the world of natural history, John is a master builder.
Without someone like myself and I mean others that are doing the same thing, a lot of these wildlife concepts just don't come to air. I mean, there's got to be somebody out there that's doing all the field work and in this particular case, I mean, building the hides, I mean, searching for it, I mean, the whole thing, and to have a camera crew to be able to come into the area and say, well, right, everything's ready to go, the field work's been done, put the man in there to do the job. I mean, that's what I'm all about.
John Young is an old friend of Jim and Densey's and has made many hides for them in the past. The whole point of the hide is to get the cameraman as near as possible to the action without scaring off the wildlife. And that usually means a safe, steady platform high up in the roof of the forest.
And it's an extremely dangerous business that I'm in 2 respects. One, because of the climbing aspects, one has to be so careful what he does. He has to realise, get to know the timber that you climb, the trees, I mean, how brittle they are. And also there's the other aspect of being hit or attacked by some of the more aggressive birds, like, for instance, the Australian rufous owl. Some people will just take fright and fall off things or other things. You just have to get really used to it. It's very, very hard. You've got to be very careful. Just check it. Yeah, no, there'll be no worries there. It'll hold. No problems.
Better you than me, mate.
Holy macaroni.
Now, this particular tree we're putting a hide in at the moment, it's called a kadagi, one of those really brittle gums. And John knows them only too well. He knows what size branch will support what weight, and that's what I rely on. Some of these things, like this one, will snap just like a carrot, and they don't give you any warning, they just break. I think when it comes to trusting your life with someone, it's very important to pick the best that there is, and I don't think there's anyone better probably in the world than John Young. There's no doubt about it. I would certainly trust him with my life.
It's just incredible the way John can shin up a tree without any help at all, just using his arms and his knees. And he is so confident that he can walk out on a limb up there, 100 feet up in the air, without a feeling of fear. And Jim has absolute confidence in John, never feels afraid, and neither do I.
It's actually quite pleasant sitting up in a hide in the rainforest filming. Now, there are times, again, where you can't move and your ankles are being punctured by hundreds of mosquitoes or sandflies or all those similar things. But you have to sit up there and not move. You tend to notice everything that moves around you. And so while you may be concentrating on one particular subject, you can't help but see everything else happening out there too. And now that's the fascinating part, and that keeps you alive, that keeps you vibrant. There have been times when the hide itself starts whipping around in the wind, and both Densey and I have literally been seasick in one particular hide that we're in filming for David Attenborough, where this wind gust came up and the whole top of the tree was moving around to such a degree, by the time we'd gathered ourselves and all our equipment falling over, we'd become quite ill.
Jim is filming a colony of native shining starlings nesting high in the treetops. The same tree is also home to a pair of goshawks and their chick. Now, at first glance, this seems a bit odd, because the goshawk is a bird of prey and usually regards the starling as lunch and not as a neighbour. But it seems that in nature, there are rules to be followed.
Shining starlings migrate from New Guinea every year to nest in the forests of far north Queensland. These gregarious birds always nest together in large colonies. Jim has noticed something strange about this colony. All except one pair of birds have immature plumage. Adult shining starlings are black with a wonderful iridescent sheen, like these birds from another colony. Yet, in spite of their seeming immaturity, these birds are clearly nesting. Jim is about to put on film something that has never been recorded for this species. The birds make their nests with vine tendrils brought from the forest and woven together. Each pair works on its own nest, but it's sometimes hard to tell which one belongs where. They commonly steal each other's nesting materials. In fact, nest building seems to be a pretty haphazard affair all round, more trial and error than anything. The nests may look a bit of a mess, but they all end up the proper shape. By the end of the season, these young starlings will probably all be first-time parents, raising their own young with the sure instinct of their kind.
There is one bird Jim and Densey particularly want to capture on film, and it lives here in the rainforest. It's Victoria's riflebird, a spectacularly beautiful bird. And when the male riflebird goes courting, it's a sight to behold. John Young has built a hide for them overlooking the area the male has picked for his mating ritual.
Oh, what a relief. Well, there she is, folks. What do you think?
Wow, what about
Pretty
that?
good, John.
Pretty close.
Beautiful
Yes.
sight. The thing I most desperately want to get on film is the actual mating of the riflebird. You can film all this fantastic behaviour, but really it's not climaxed until you get the actual mating behaviour itself. And I've been trying and trying and trying. I believe it's utterly spectacular. It's even more spectacular than the actual courtship behaviour. The riflebird has a territory, and it stays wholly within that territory. But within the territory, he may have a half a dozen stumps or places that he sits in order to attract females to him. Now, the only way that he can attract a female into his territory is to give a regular call. And the call is just a simple squawk to our ears, but the females really do come rattling in. They're not all going to mate, and in fact, on the fringes of his territory are the males, and so the females have great choices. But what I'm really saying is that this increases our chances for the length of time that we have to sit there and in order to get the behaviour that we would like to get.
There are 3 species of riflebird, all restricted to Queensland's coastal rainforest. They're closely related to the New Guinea birds of paradise. Victoria's riflebird is strictly tropical. In the dense rainforest where it lives, it's not surprising that the male bird should choose a conspicuous place for its display, usually a clearing like this one, left by a fallen or decapitated tree. Riflebirds are fruit eaters, and the females are quite likely to be foraging around the edge of a clearing like this. They couldn't possibly fail to see the acrobatic display being put on for their benefit. The trouble is, most of the time, the females seem to be more interested in food than in all that macho swank and swagger. And that's the way it is this time. So we'll just have to move on to something else and try again later on in the season.
I became interested in photography approximately 20 years ago. Densey was introduced to me, and she was taking these wonderful photographs of frogs and insects and other things. And I thought, gee, I'd love to have a go at that, and I'd never even handled a camera before. And when I finally came to Sydney and started working with Densey, she taught me the rudiments of photography. And I guess my whole career grew from that point on.
Jim's career certainly has grown. He is one of the most respected natural history cameramen in the world. But his inventiveness has meant getting involved in other kinds of filmmaking as well.
One of the problems with filming wildlife is that most of the lenses that are available on the shelves don't necessarily do what you want to do. So I've actually been forced to build lenses to do the sorts of things that I've envisaged that a lens should do. One of the successful lenses is this one, for instance. If you want a shot from ground level, looking at the actual specimen in front, it puts a lot of it in focus, and you get their eye view of the world, their point of view. Now, another one, which I nostalgically call the Dennis Connell lens, I used in a production to capture a good deal of wide angle, especially close-up, and a lens like this has a very good depth of focus. Now, this particular one does what the previous one does, but I've used it a lot on butterflies, where you get butterflies in the foreground in focus, but by moving the lens like this, you're actually achieving cranes. This little one enables you not only to get on the ground, but like the others, you can push them into hollow logs, you can put them against the side of a tree and film upwards, but more effectively, you can actually turn it around and film retro or backwards. And I did another shot in the Challenge using that lens. The lens that has come to most attention is this little secret in the black box. This one I particularly like. I've come up with a configuration that puts into focus everything from an ant here to an elephant or mountains in the background. It doesn't matter. And I'm really proud of this little job and what it does.
Most of my photography is done outdoors because I like to be out in the bush, and I like to find the insects and so forth just doing their thing and photograph them naturally. But there are times when I have to come inside and use a studio setup. There are several reasons for this. If I'm photographing flowers, for instance, flowers are constantly on the move. They're never still. People think that because they're flowers, because they're rooted to the spot, you know, they're easy. Anyone can go and photograph them. You just watch a flower for a while and you'll see it's moving. There's always a current of wind. So the best thing then is to bring the flower indoors and photograph it against a nice background where everything's still. And there's another reason for indoor photography too. With very small insects or spiders, you can control them much better if you've got them, for instance, on a stem or a leaf, confined to that area, set up on a table, set up on a stand, where they can't get away and they're really at your mercy. So there you can let your head go and you know you're going to get a shot. I suppose I took up spider watching and insect watching because I was a rather solitary child. And I think solitary children tend to have an affinity for nature rather than an affinity for other people. So I used to go out and wander around when I was a child and see what was in the grass, what was in the bushes. I loved the garden, I loved the flowers. And I just gradually built up a kind of respect and love, if you like, for the very small creatures that being small myself, of course, I could find around me.
Ouch, right.
Forest Beach, north of Townsville, is home to the green weaver ants. When even well-meaning natural historians start messing around with their carefully constructed home, the ants get angry. They grip the skin with their mandibles and squirt acid from their tails into the tiny pinpricks. It's not poisonous, but it stings. John's hands are blistered and numb with pain. Jim, Densey and John are after the pupa of the butterfly caterpillar that lives right inside the weaver ant's nest, and they find one. Why would a caterpillar choose to grow up in a weaver ant's nest? Because there is a plentiful supply of weaver ant larvae to snack on while turning into a butterfly. And that is what Jim wants to film. The moment when the butterfly emerges from its pupa into the nest of angry ants. Jim, who is a bit of a mad scientist, has invented a system that will tell them when the pupa shell is about to break. Then they have to hurry so they can replace the pupa in the nest and film this remarkable cycle of nature.
Tapping.
It is too. Oh, beauty.
Okay.
Oh, hit the lights, hit. Oh,
Instead of casting off its skin first, like all other caterpillars, this one actually pupated inside its skin. So, still in the ant's nest, it retained its protective covering right through to the time of its emergence as a butterfly. When the butterfly emerged still inside the nest, it immediately lost that protection. Now, soft and vulnerable, it has to find its way to the outside of the nest. And the stretching and drying of its wings will take some time. Any other butterfly would soon end up as nursery high tea. Not this one. This butterfly has a unique defense. Its abdomen has a dense covering of what looks like soft grey fur, but it's really a mass of coiled hairs. Its wings are overlaid with frosty white scales that come loose at a touch. The ants only have to climb up on the butterfly's wings to go sliding down again. If the ants try to bite the butterfly's body, their mandibles end up clogged with those extremely tenacious hairs. Trying to get rid of them, the ants forget all about their long frustration with the guest that came to dinner and stayed to eat their children. Soon, the butterfly will spread its wings and fly off into the sunshine to find a mate. And who'd ever guess then at its rather dubious past?
Jim and Densey are two Australians whose work is known and respected all over the world. But maybe we Australians have lost touch with our natural surroundings. Maybe we just don't care.
I think Australians are years behind other countries. In point of fact, Europeans have been exposed to programs like David Attenborough for 25 years, whereas in Australia it's had a very superficial approach by a lot of filmmakers. And we tend to try to hang in with the quality material, but it hasn't in the past gone down very well in Australia, whereas overseas it's been accepted. The other thing is, I think Australians have very, very much lost that affinity with natural history out there, whereas the Europeans have really held on to it and never really lost it.
My thoughts about the Australian attitudes towards wildlife, I think, are rather ambivalent. I think on the one hand, there's still a bit of a pioneering spirit where it's a conquest, it's still a bit of a conquest of nature. On the other hand, I'm in touch with children and women and men, quite a lot of men, who watch my television programs, read my books and so on. And over the past 20 years, I think that there's been a marked change in attitudes towards the smaller wildlife. I think that people are beginning to look at insects and spiders as quite fascinating aspects of natural history. And they don't step on them and spray them and kill them as much as they used to, which is great.
There's no doubt about it, but the biggest thrill for me is seeing on television some of the triumphs, whether it's in our programs or other people's programs. It's all the one thing, or something like the birth of the koala, which was a bit of both. It was a fantastic triumph on the one hand and a terrible disaster on the other. I'd actually filmed the birth of a koala. And unbeknownst to me, one tiny little bit of grit in the camera gate totally wrecked the film. And that particular night we drank champagne thinking that we'd had it in the can, and we didn't have anything in the can at all. Those things, I think Murphy's probably my greatest foe out there. Mr. Murphy's got a lot to answer for when I meet up with him.
Bulldog ants are a breed most of us try to avoid, but they're a breed high on Jim and Densey's research agenda, and so it's back to the forest and the rain to collect the specimens. They load up their container with hundreds of bulldog ants. The egg boxes are a bit like the sort of quarters the ants build for themselves and form a kind of home away from home while they're transported back to Jim's formicarium, an ant nest built specifically for film work.
Yeah. The trouble is with using endoscopes is you need lots of light. Now most light sources generate quite a lot of heat. Here we go. So we need special lights. This particular light is a fibre optic light and it's quite cool. You can probably see that the ants aren't even worried by this, although they might attack the lens. I'll just track through into this other chamber.
What we can see now is how Jim goes about getting the film, which is cut and then scripted by Densey and used in natural history programs all over the world.
I'm always surprised how easy it is to set up a colony of bulldog ants in a formicarium. I mean, after the initial very hard work of digging them up. Whatever they think of their artificial nest, the ants soon organise themselves the way they would underground.
Now this looks pretty good. It's coming in over the larvae, some ants. Go through into this other chamber.
The first priority is the safety of the queen. She's established in one of the safest chambers down near the bottom of the nest. With fresh food and water provided daily, the colony is soon a going concern again. Young ones are tended constantly. The nursery attendants use their enormous mandibles as gently as a mother's hands to lift and move them. Here's the queen in her new chamber. She's not much bigger than her daughters, but you can identify her by the bulging wing muscles that powered her mating flight. Here's one of the larger workers for comparison. No wing muscles, and altogether more slender.
Now, I'm using this particular camera setup because I need to take over from where the endoscope left off and get in onto some of the very intimate behaviour that the queen does.
The queen spends her whole life laying eggs. She needed to mate only once, so there's no male in the nest. All the workers are females. She curves the tip of her abdomen forward and picks the egg up very gently in her mandibles. It'll be taken from her and put in the incubating chamber with the rest. Jim and I were astonished to see not just the queen, but some of the workers laying eggs. Well, it turned out that this is quite normal. The eggs laid by the workers are infertile, of course, and they're laid specifically to be eaten.
A lot of Jim's work is done in this lab, and over the years, he's built up the equipment he needs to get exactly the shots he wants.
Right, this device, for the want of a better name, is called an optical bench. And basically, it's a machine for filming high magnification with a fixed camera. Now, what it really means is that you can orient your specimen by panning, tilting, rotating under extremely smooth high magnification. And the nice thing is that with this particular design is that it's a double turntable system, and the backgrounds are a very important factor in the construction of this. So we have a whole range of different backgrounds that can be put into position. And one of the important features of a machine like this is that when you put an insect up in front of all these little cool bright lights, is they're totally unaware of the micro movements and the rotations. It's all so smooth.
This sort of stuff is called time-lapse photography, and while it's beautiful, it has its problems.
Time-lapse is absolutely fraught with problems. You can get a week into a shot and the flower will suddenly bend over and die. And that's not really what you wanted. You wanted the flower to fully open. That happens a lot. There's great scientific value in that sort of photography because you can see how something does unfurl, how something folds in the most unusual way, or how a particular plant copes with the particular way that it opens by pulling petals against one another. So, you know, it has a great scientific value. The real pleasure for me is seeing those few seconds of a flower, just the beauty of it opening in, especially to music.
It's back to the rainforest in North Queensland and back to chasing a world exclusive. Filming the courtship display and mating of Victoria's riflebird. As we saw earlier, Jim had already spent 30 days in an unsuccessful attempt to film the ritual. But in the true spirit of wildlife photography, it's try, try, try again. It's a long, hot slog through the forest to the hide John Young has built for them, and the trials and tribulations of hide living.
Patience is something that is the first and foremost requirement of this game. You have to have the utmost patience, and if that means sitting for very long periods of time with cramps and mosquitoes biting your ankles, or in the case of the crabs, march flies, you just have to sit there and bear it, and for as long as it takes. It gets awfully difficult sometimes.
Right.
We haven't done that for a while.
The food that you take with you tends to be light because it's more of the stuff you've got to lug through the rainforest and eventually haul up into the hide. So you tend to take ready-made sandwiches or fruit. And if it's hot, you obviously have to take a lot of liquid. And of course that creates problems at the other end. Now, oftentimes you need an absolutely cast iron bladder because you know damn well, like the mozzies, you can't move. But at the same time, you've got to peer over the edge and say, well, you know, I've got no alternative but to do what you have to do over the edge. You can't afford the time to run up and down the ladder and let the animal know that you're there. So you cope as best you can.
After 7 days of waiting for both Jim and the riflebird, a female arrives in the area, and the Victoria's riflebird starts to send out the oldest signal in nature. Here, for the first time on film, is this astounding courtship display.
It's a waiting game, and like Jim in the hide, this male Victoria's riflebird has a lot of time to fill in. The riflebird calls at regular intervals. It's pure luck that this one seems to spend most of his time here, only 3 meters away from Jim's treetop hide. There's no doubt his keen eyes can see every tiny movement of the camera lens, but his focus is elsewhere. For the female riflebirds feeding in the trees around the clearing, it's a different matter. They're decidedly apprehensive about the hide. It'll take a truly magnificent display to lure one of them to the stump. Magnificent is the right word. This male's a brilliant performer and an untiring one. Riflebirds are polygamous. A male mates with many females over a season, which means he's far too busy to play any part in nesting or caring for what can turn out to be a very extensive family. From his lookout post, the male can easily see any female arriving at the clearing. Instantly, he goes into his display. The closer she is, the more intense and ritualized his movements become. He turns to face her wherever she goes. To other males in his territory, the response is different. At last, a female finds it all too much to resist. But Jim, behind the camera, sees her looking straight at him. Of course, what she's really looking at is the big black eye of the camera. It could mean danger. He's not taking any chances. For both Jim and the male, there's a series of such frustrating starts and stops. Here's another female. She's nervous, but the trembling of her wings indicates submission. The male's excitement increases to fever pitch. Just one more letdown. Around noon, when the sun reaches into the clearing, the riflebird leaves his perch for a while. Perhaps in the bright sunlight he feels exposed to enemies. Anyhow, he has to eat sometime. He needs the energy. This female seems all set to stay, to accept the male. But what's this? He squawks his frustration. Whatever that bit of imitative display meant, it obviously didn't mean acceptance.
But Jim and the Riflebird are about to be repaid for their long vigil.
It's a love story with a happy ending all round. The Riflebird has a mate and Jim has his film. Just another day at the office for Jim Frazier and Densey Klein and their friend John Young. A day that's taken the best part of 2 months, but has brought them a world exclusive and us a rare look at a piece of Australia's wildlife.
People really don't realise what we've got in this place, and I think if we don't try and protect it and look after it, I mean, our kids down the line are just not going to see it. I mean, somebody's got to really take an interest, and I think that's what we're all about.
I hate to be fenced in any way, by time or by place. I like to feel free. I don't get enough time to just wander about in the bush or along the back of a beach or something like that and look for things and just take my time and know that I have all the time in the world, because that's the way I've learnt about my insects and spiders and all the other wildlife that I'm fascinated by just going out there and wandering around. And it's not the way to make money, you know, it's just a way of enjoying yourself. Jim and I both like that best, to be free out there in the bush with our cameras, just looking, seeing what we can find.
I guess I wouldn't swap it for any other life in the world. It's great. You don't make a lot of money out of making wildlife films. In fact, you live quite poorly. But this sort of lifestyle of being out here, learning about animals and watching animals do extraordinary things, there's nothing, there's no job in an office in a city that could come anywhere near it.